Hello. For my journal project, I decided to focus on the journal Research in the Teaching of English, Research in the Teaching English Journal. I did both from 2000 to 2005, as well as 2018, 2019 until the present day. In my presentation, I will first make my claim that was a result of the patterns and shifts I noticed during those two 5-year periods. And then I will speak about those patterns and shifts that I observed that led to my claim. Then I will delineate the aspects of my claim with supporting information from articles from those two time periods. So the claim that will anchor my presentation is the following. As the understanding of social justice has shifted over the last 20 years in the field of English studies or English teaching, so has the focus, frequency, and topic itself of studies around race and bilingualism in the field. The topic focus, forgive the train, the topic focus used to be an emphasis on inclusion and almost having to prove that racism was still an important factor in education and still harmful under the umbrella of what we commonly refer to as multicultural studies. The shift over the last 20 years is as, as reflective of the social change that our country has gone under and understanding of social justice. The shift in the field of English teaching has then shifted more towards critical race theory, which is rooted in deconstruction of voices of power and shifting the voices of the marginalized and the oppressed from the marginalized to the center, as well as decolonizing curriculum and focusing on racial reparative justice and not just inclusion. So that is my claim that is reflective of the shift that I saw. When I first looked at the research in the Teaching English Journal, I began with the 2018 year and looked to the present. My seminar paper topic has to do with equity and inclusion in writing curriculum and pedagogy for the marginalized groups of students. And so I was looking for those kinds of articles. I was really surprised to see that I would say above 4/5 of the articles that I saw, so the great majority, were actually under the umbrella topic of including marginalized voices with all different kinds of subtopics, such as multilanguage learning. There was a great emphasis on Black literacy, stories, and voice, as well as reparative justice, and also a great emphasis on anti-colonial studies. There was in the year 2018, so the beginning of that 5-year period, there were a lot less articles about this topic, a lot less of race study articles. More of the articles were focusing on ethics, connection, conflict, disability, process writing, and assessment in the classroom. But there was still about half of the articles in the journal that were about bilingualism, multiculturalism, and race study in the classroom and in composition studies or in English studies. So that is a great majority and so much to choose from when it comes to this topic in the current day, as opposed to going back to 2000. So I chose the year 2000 because that's when I started my undergraduate degree in English teaching. So I remember there being a great emphasis on multicultural studies when I was in school then. And I remembered also that the focus was on inclusion and kind of proving why multiculturalism mattered. We're kind of proving that racism was still a factor in learning and in inequity. So back to 2000, there were a lot less articles to choose from on multiculturalism studies. So it was more focused on digital literacy assessment, in the classroom under the umbrella of holistic scoring, portfolio assessments, rubrics. There were quite a few articles on a writing process approach. There were critical inquiries into language, the impact on technology on writing, challenges of implementing writing across curriculum, or shorter, the acronym WAC. WAC. That was a great emphasis, WAC. The validity and reliability of different writing assessments, rubrics versus portfolios and things like that, as I already mentioned. There were ESL articles on ESL. Now we call dual language more, or multi-language, instead of English as a second language, but in the year 2000, it was English as a second language, also multiculturalism. The articles were about 1 out of 5, so about 1 per issue that were the umbrella of under race study. And so that's quite a different balance in the journal 20 years ago, 15 years ago, as opposed to now. And so now where I can bring in now I will bring in some sources to talk about those specific differences. In the year, let's see, in 2000 and in 2005, I have an article from both. In the year 2000, I have Cultivating Hybrid Texts in Multicultural Classrooms, Both a Promise and a Challenge is the article title, and it's by Judith Solskin et al. And they did a study where they invited school children's families into the classroom to contribute to the multi-language and multicultural curriculum, the language arts curriculum. And their theory was that language and literacy, quote, language and literacy would flourish through social interaction and meaningful communication, where students' growth would unfold from the language and literacy they brought from home, unquote. So as you can see, this article shows that inclusion approach, that when there's an inclusion of multicultural approaches, that there is a strengthening in the language and in the content. Another article from that time period is My Ancestors, this is a quote, My Ancestors Didn't Own Slaves, Understanding White Talk About Race. This is from 2005 by Jennifer Siebel Trainer. She talked about basically proving racism was still a problem, which I thought was fascinating. Just in 2005, she talked about how, quote, racist language functions in a metaphoric way and how it connects common racist ideas and non-racist feelings, values, beliefs, associations, and desires. She also said, quote, while I agree on one level that a conception of racism is as a result of individual negative feelings toward minority groups is reductive, I have also come to see that we cannot ignore the complex role that students' feelings play in their talk about race, end quote. So that article shows the conversation was still centered around what racism looked like, what the structure of the language of racism looked like in the classroom, and how that impacted students. As opposed to the articles in the last few years, which I think show the shift, which proves my claim that shows the shifts in both society, the acceptance of systematic racism, the acceptance of, well, hopefully, and the acceptance of actual restorative, reparative racial justice, as opposed to just inclusion, and the shifting of minority voices to the center. One article that I came across was called sorry, just a second. It was called We Are More Than That, Latina Girls Writing Themselves from Margins to Center. I won't quote from that article, but the article was about a curriculum that was designed by Latino girl voices through a feminist theory, as well as a racial study theory. And then the last article that I will quote is from the Continuum of Racial Literacies, Teacher Practices Countering White Stream Bilingual Education. This article is by Laura C. Chavez, and she proposes a continuum of racial literacies approach to curriculum and pedagogy, which gives opportunities to dual language curriculum where there's critical racial consciousness that actually takes action to further critical mindedness and action rather than just inclusion. So, in conclusion, my articles and quotes and the patterns and shifts that I observed show that shift in thinking and patterns from the racial study of inclusion and general racial study to one of more action, restorative justice, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and how that can all affect the learning in the classroom, both with dual language students from young to old into the university level. So thank you so much for watching.